Welcome everybody to Care Week, a week of free services from the Center for Relationships. I see a lot of new faces here today, so welcome back. I'm AJ and I'm the brand director, and I'm here to welcome you to Self-Compassion for Caregivers, Parents and Guardians with Oliver Davidson. If you don't know about us already, and I think most or all of you do, we are a community counseling and outreach center based in the Austin, Texas area. We provide mental health resources through counseling for individuals, couples, families, and groups. And we also provide mental health resources through community education, like the webinar that you're at today. This is our 8th annual Care Week, and it's our 2nd year going fully virtual with Care Week. So if you're not from Texas, or if you are, please let us know in the chat where you're from. We love to hear who we're reaching every year. Before we get started in the workshop, I just have a few housekeeping notes I want to cover real quick. There are no materials needed for this workshop, but we are going to be practicing some self-compassion exercises in this workshop. So if you can, make sure that you're somewhere comfortable, away from any distractions or anything that may be disruptive to your experience. Before we get started, I just want to introduce Oliver, our facilitator. Oliver Davidson is a graduate student intern at TCFR with a master's in educational psychology from UT Austin. He specializes in helping people navigate difficult relationship and life transitions and works with individuals, couples, blended and complex families, as well as both adults and adolescents. His expertise varies from relationships, careers, and parenting to neurodevelopment, anxiety and stress, depression, and even shame. Oliver's counseling style uses a relationship focused on trust and safety to help clients normalize their experiences, get unstuck from the past or future, and tackle life's challenges. And without further ado, Oliver, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks so much for that introduction, AJ, and welcome everyone to Self-Compassion for Caregivers, Parents, and Guardians. I'm so excited to have you here today. I just want to start with just giving you a little bit about myself. So for the better part of the last decade, I've researched self-compassion with Dr. Kristen Neff as part of her self-compassion lab at UT Austin. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Kristen Neff, she's largely credited with being the first person to research and really popularize the idea of self-compassion. You've probably seen her in quotes or podcasts. She's kind of just everywhere at this point. Alongside the research I've done with her, though, I've also helped her teach a popular course at UT on mindfulness and self-compassion. And now in the last couple of years, I'm starting to switch my focus from research to practice and started using the tools of mindfulness and self-compassion that I helped research to help individuals, couples, and families as a therapist. And I'm really excited to share this presentation with you today because in many ways, it's bringing my career and interest in self-compassion full circle. What originally drew me to these ideas was a book I read about compassion right after my son was born. At the time, like a lot of parents, I was sleep deprived, probably a little depressed, and just generally frustrated with my relationships as a partner and a father. And these ideas about compassion that I'm going to share with you today, it really helped me change my relationship with myself, and by extension, also really change my relationship with my partner and my son. As soon as I learned about this, I thought, wow, how important this would be to share these ideas with other parents. So I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about this to you today. Okay, so what exactly are we going to learn in this workshop? So first, we're just going to learn how to pay attention to how we're feeling. This might sound simple, but how we're talking to so pay attention because, sometimes we just kind of push through things and we just don't notice, and it can just like taking a moment to stop and just start paying attention to how we're doing can be a really important first step. Then we're going to think about how we talk to ourselves. Half the battle is really just, being able to not just dump on ourselves when we're down, but, start to think about, notice that and start to change that and turn that around so that we're talking to ourselves just a little bit more positively. And then finally, we're going to, work on actively relating to yourself with a little bit more warmth and kindness. And to do this, we're going to spend a good chunk of this workshop just practicing a couple of my favorite self-compassion tools, so that you can put them in your toolbox, and hopefully the next time you find yourself getting into an argument with your partner or kiddo at dinner, or you have a meltdown going on in the back seat when you're driving, or whatever it is, you have the resources to handle the situation and avoid turning a difficult moment into a full-blown disaster. So I just want to start by acknowledging that parenting is really, really hard. Sometimes kids, test our boundaries. I mean, it's just sort of naturally what they do. Parents constantly have to manage competing demands of raising kids, managing a household, and increasingly juggle demands at work as well. As parents, we're often not getting enough sleep or food or exercise. And I think, a lot of parents have had that experience of cooking a full meal for the family at the end of a long day and then just being too exhausted to even eat. So, especially parents with young kids might also feel lonely and cut off from their adult relationships. They might have friends whose kids are too old and they don't want to hang out with a toddler, or they have friends who don't have kids yet. They're not interested in doing parenting things. The list goes on and on. And even when you're doing, everything right and, taking care of all these other things, sometimes you just have really bad days as a parent where you just feel completely overwhelmed. So, what can we do as parents to deal with all these challenges? I'm going to show a short video here that I think holds a few clues to what we might be able to do to help ourselves. Oops.
Are you suffering from exhaustion, sleep deprivation, headaches? Is your hair thinning? Do you ever wonder to yourself, what happened? Then you might be suffering from parenting. Parenting affects 10 out of 10 mothers and fathers around the world and can lead to extreme debt and loss of self-identity. You may need a fucking break. A fucking break lets you step away from it all. Results of a fucking break may vary. Side effects include a sigh of relief, decrease in blood pressure, and hanging with the boys. Do not take a fucking break if there's no one watching your kids, and if you've taken one in the last 24 hours. Talk to your spouse before you take a fucking break. Parenting is not easy. Take a fucking break.
So, obviously this video is meant to be a little bit silly, but I think there's some truth in it as well, right? We have to learn to take care of ourselves as parents and to give ourselves some compassion. This doesn't necessarily mean just taking a break. There are lots of small ways that we can learn to take care of ourselves every day. Oftentimes parents put their own needs last out of fear it would be lazy or selfish to do otherwise. But we can't take care of ourselves or of others if we're not being taken care of ourselves. And unfortunately, as parents who have busy partners and families that might live hundreds or thousands of miles away, and friends who may be busy with their own kids and families, we may be the only one there to take care of ourselves sometimes. And I'm going to encourage you in this workshop to stop thinking that caring for yourself as selfish or indulgent and start thinking of it as self-preservation. To borrow the analogy from flying on an airplane, it's putting on your own oxygen mask first before you can put your oxygen mask on your child. So what exactly is self-compassion? In the simplest terms, it's treating ourselves with the same care, concern, kindness that we would show to a close friend. Now, this may seem too easy, but I think you would be surprised how rarely we extend the same warmth and kindness to ourselves when we fail or make a mistake that we would readily give to our friends or children in the same situation. So we are going to take a minute to do our first exercise here. If you have a piece of paper handy or can pull up a Word document to write on, I would encourage you to do so now. But if you are on your phone or have your hands full, you can just think about your responses. So I'd like to invite you to, when you've had that paper out and you're ready to go, just think of a time or various times when you've had a close friend that suffered in some way. It's best not to use a partner or family member, because sometimes they can be too close, but a friend you really cared about who was struggling. For example, maybe you had a friend who had a misfortune, failed, or felt inadequate. How do you typically respond to your friends in such situations? What do you say? How is your tone? What nonverbal gestures do you use? Just take a minute to reflect on that and write down some answers to those questions. All right, now if you've had some time to think and write and finish, responding to those questions, I'd like to now ask you to think of a time or various times when you've suffered in some way, had a misfortune, failed, or felt inadequate. How do you typically respond to yourself in such a situation? What do you say? What is your tone? What nonverbal gestures do you use? Take a moment to just think about those and jot down whatever you notice stands out to you. Now, if you've had a chance to finish writing up your responses to that question, I'd like you to reflect and write down any differences you notice between how you respond to yourself and how you respond to others. Just take a moment to think about those differences. All right, now that you've had a chance to reflect a little bit on those differences, I'd just like to see if anyone is comfortable sharing, what they noticed from that thought exercise. What stood out? Was there anything surprising? Feel free to put any comments in the chat. As to friends, a lot of listening without talking, not trying to solve their problems, more trying to control the situation with myself. Yeah, sometimes with friends, we just give them some space, just hear them out without start problem solving. And with ourselves, we just got to fix it. We got to get right in there and get to it. Yeah, I relate to that. Any other thoughts? Yeah, fix mode for sure. Well, I appreciate those comments. I think, that fix mode is this very true. Also kind of like what I noticed is really tone. Like, I think it's surprising how hard I can be on myself. Like, some of the stuff we say to ourselves, we wouldn't even say to our worst enemy sometimes, but we just kind of carte blanche when it comes to ourselves. So, just kind of noticing, yeah, tone differences for sure. Just kind of noticing those different qualities, how much gentler and kinder, how much more space and grace we give friends, and how with ourselves we just go into fixing, and we can do it in a very hard, harsh way sometimes. So now I'd like to go into self-compassion in a little bit more detail about the specific components or skills that go into treating yourself like you would a good friend when you're suffering. The first component of self-compassion is mindfulness. When we're being mindful of our suffering, we're really doing two things. First, we're noticing our suffering. For some of us, we tend to just grit and bear our suffering and just try to push through without ever acknowledging it. Others tend to get lost in the storylines of their suffering. For example, you might be in traffic and a little late for work, and first you might just be a little upset with the car in front of you for making you late. And you might start getting mad at all the people moving to Austin, making all of our traffic worse. then you might think that this never would have happened if your partner hadn't asked you to help with the kids right before you had to leave. And that might lead you to get even more upset about how your partner never supports you. This is really that spiral of just getting taken away with a storyline, how a small event can really lead to, this catastrophizing. The idea of mindfulness is just to acknowledge your suffering exactly how it is, that you can do something about your suffering without making it worse than it needs to be. The second component of self-compassion is common humanity. Common humanity really reminds us that suffering is just a part of the human experience. Oftentimes, when we're suffering, we tend to think of all the other people in our lives who, on the surface, seem to be having a much easier time of things, and we feel like we're the only ones struggling. Common humanity helps us remember that we're not alone or unique in our suffering. Everyone has struggles, and there are probably lots of people out there struggling with similar problems. I think it's important to note that this is different than saying there are all these other people out there who have it worse off than me. This is really minimizing your suffering. It's saying that my suffering isn't valid because other people are suffering more. With common humanity, we're really just connecting to the common collective experience of suffering that everyone goes through at some point in their life. Finally, the self-kindness component of self-compassion is the part that gives you warmth and support. Self-kindness is the gesture or action or kind, encouraging words you need to hear to pick yourself up, rather than piling on with harsh self-criticism, which you might have noticed yourself using in the last exercise. So why are we so hard on ourselves, and how can self-compassion help? I want to introduce you to the 3 circles model of emotion on the right. This can be a handy way of helping us think about our emotions and how we regulate them. The first circle I want to draw your attention to is the threat defense circle on the bottom, the big red one. This is the emotional system in charge of keeping us safe. It's always scanning and alerting us to dangers. And because of this, it's associated with some pretty strong and powerful emotions that are meant to grab our attention and get us moving, like fear, anxiety, and anger. For a lot of us, this threat defense system tends to dominate our other systems. It's on hyper alert for threats out there. And this wasn't so bad when we were on the plains and our primary danger was getting eaten. We noticed the danger and got a big boost of fear and adrenaline and ran until that danger was gone. However, now the threats we tend to face are much more abstract and difficult to respond to, and the threat defense system doesn't always work quite so well. Sometimes when we fail or make a mistake, our overactive threat defense system can turn on us and start attacking us with self-criticism so we don't make that mistake again. It also might try to flee and avoid our emotional experience or isolate us with shame. Finally, it might make us freeze and ruminate on the problem or mistake. What was said? What could have been done differently? So if the threat defense system is about keeping us safe, the next circle I really want to talk about is that safety soothing system, the green one on top to the right. This is all about feeling safe. Whereas the threat defense system activates us when we need to respond to a threat, the safety soothing system helps us calm and soothe ourselves when the danger is past and there aren't threats we have to respond to. This system is really associated with feelings of safety, warmth, and connection. Because we're very social animals, our safety soothing system is usually very tied to our social connections. When we think about these feelings of safety and contentment, we usually think about things like our parents rubbing our head or our back, or sitting around the dinner table with family, things that let you know you were cared for. With self-compassion, we're trying to bring a little bit of balance to these 3 circles. With mindfulness, we're really bringing down that threat response. So we're not attacking ourselves so much. And with kindness and common humanity, we're really warming up that safety soothing system and letting ourselves know that we're cared for. Another point I want to make about how self-compassion helps us respond to difficult emotions is the connection between the mind and the body. Thoughts influence our physiology. When we start thinking about how our kiddo has no right to act or talk to us that way, start getting angry, our physiology is going to start preparing us for a fight. We'll get that kick of adrenaline, our heart will start racing, our chest will get tight, our neck will tense, our jaw might clench. All these signs that we have a lot of tension or anger in the body. Similarly, if we don't get enough sleep or drink too much caffeine to compensate, our physiology might be a little on edge, already a little activated. And that might lead us to jump more quickly, to have nervous or anxious thoughts about the situation or the environment around us. But the good news is that the opposite is true. And we can use warm, kind thoughts to calm our body. And similarly, we can use breathing and touch to change our physiology and calm our thoughts. And so self-compassion really uses both of these routes, physiological and psychological, to help us calm our threat system and boost our safety soothing system. So using what we've learned about the three circles and the physiology and psychology of that mind-body connection, let's take a look at how self-compassion can help us respond better as parents and caregivers in the moment. Let's take an example many parents may be familiar with, a temper tantrum in a public place. Your kiddo starts crying and screaming over something. You might try to calm and console them quickly just to get them to stop, but that doesn't work. And they are really starting to ramp up now. Your emotions are starting to activate in response. At this point, if you look at the situations, thoughts, and feelings, you might start feeling embarrassed. You might start feeling angry. You just want them to stop. It's not fair that they're going to do this to you in this public place. So ungrateful. Maybe just the screaming and crying is hurting your ears and triggering those emotions of threat that you just want it to stop. And so those difficult, sticky emotions are going to activate that threat defense system. And they can take you in directions that you may not necessarily want to go. You come to this choice at how you're going to handle the situation. And when those difficult emotions start to overwhelm you, you may respond in a way that you don't necessarily want to, that may seem to help in the moment, but doesn't actually kind of help you be the parent you want to be. So you may start escalating your threats to them, just trying to get that temper tantrum to stop. You might start threatening to take away things or try to find that perfect consequence that's going to get that behavior to stop in that moment. But, as your physiology is escalating in response, their physiology is also going to escalate with you. And so you're just increasing the volume of that conflict. But with self-compassion, what we really want to do is sort of at that choice point where we realize we're starting to get activated and we're going down this road that we don't want to go, we can really calm ourselves down with a little bit of mindfulness and warm ourselves up with a little bit of self-compassion, and then just really give us some space from those difficult emotions so that we can choose how we want to react and how we want to respond. And by bringing ourselves down, we can help regulate our child's emotion. And then we can think about how we can respond to them in a way that gets them back on a rational, reasonable responding track rather than continuing to escalate, and maybe address their needs more curiously, try to figure out what they need in that moment to help them soothe. They might not be getting what they want from that temper tantrum, but at least you can find a way to help them calm and resolve that situation in a way that doesn't cause disconnect or rifts in the relationship. And so you really get that moment to choose how you want to be as a parent rather than just responding instinctually to those sticky, difficult emotions. And then also, I think one thing that's really important to notice too is sometimes we're really afraid of the outcomes of those decisions we make that maybe if we choose one path over another, we won't be able to necessarily cope with the outcome. And I think self-compassion also helps give us a little confidence that no matter what that outcome is, even if we fail or make another mistake, we'll still be there to support ourselves. And sometimes that can be really powerful too. So at this point, we're going to start getting into the exercises, the experiential portion of this workshop more. And so the first one we're going to do is just a mindful check-in. And the really important reason I'm doing this mindful check-in and why it's really important is it's just an exercise to help get you used to noticing what's going on around you and what's going on in your body. As we said, a lot of times we tend to just push through or bulldoze through our emotional experience. And the mindful check-in is really about just noticing what's going on, paying attention to where you're at and what you might need in that moment so you have a chance to respond differently. So with this exercise, we're just going to try to notice things as we are. We're not going to try to think about them, analyze them. We're really just going to think about, what does that feel like? What is that sensation? Just noticing, you might be noticing, we're going to notice touch, sounds, feelings in the body. Just pay attention to what is that experience like without necessarily thinking about it. So we're going to start by just paying attention to what's going on around us, and then we're going to slowly move that awareness inside ourselves. This will be just, as I said, a really good exercise for just starting to notice what our internal world is like and getting used to checking in with ourselves regularly. So now I'd like to invite you to find a comfortable position. It's helpful if you can place your feet on the floor. This tends to really ground us in this exercise, but find whatever position is comfortable for you. You can stand, you can lie down, whatever you need in this moment to just feel comfortable and relaxed. So once you've found, a comfortable, grounded position, I'd like to invite you to close your eyes, or if that's not comfortable, just look down and away and just kind of soften your gaze. Let's just start this exercise by just noticing what's going on around us. Just pay attention to any sounds in the room around you. You can pay attention to the sound of my voice, or you might notice the hum of an airplane going by. Maybe hear the AC vent in the background. Just notice the sounds. Now start expanding your awareness. Start thinking about the sounds maybe outside your room. Pay attention to any other sounds going on in the house. Maybe a creak from the floor above. Maybe a kid playing with toys in the next room. And now finally start to notice sounds outside your room. Cars going by, people passing and chatting. Now I'd like to invite you to bring your awareness to your body, your external body. Just notice how you're sitting right now. You might notice the way your feet are making contact with the floor. You might notice the way your thighs are making contact with the chair. Maybe you notice your posture in your back, a little tension that's there from where you're slumping over in front of the computer. The way you're holding your shoulders. Just take a moment to notice your external body. Now I invite you to start to move your awareness inwards. You might just start by noticing your shoulders. Is there any tension in your shoulders? A lot of us tend to carry tension right there. Maybe move your awareness around to your face. Think about how you're holding your jaw right now. Is it loose and relaxed, or is it tight, clenched? Maybe noticing your eyes. Are they feeling tired from a long morning? Noticing your forehead, your face. And bringing our awareness down to our chest. Just seeing how our chest feels right now. Is our heart beating fast or slow? Is our chest tight? Maybe it's relaxed. Now let's bring our awareness to our breath. Just find your breath wherever it's most comfortable. That might be in your chest as it goes up and down, or it might be in your nostrils as the air goes in and out. Just find that place where you can notice your breath. Just breathe naturally and notice it for a few breaths. Now I'd like to invite you to bring your awareness back to the sounds in your room. Noticing that AC vent, or that hum of the computer. And expanding that awareness again to the sounds outside. Maybe your kiddo playing. TV on in the background. And then finally opening your eyes and coming back to the here and now. So take a moment to just wake back up and come back here. And whenever you're ready, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that exercise. What was that like checking in with yourself this morning? Feel free to put comments in the chat. You enjoyed the transition from external to internal, felt gentle. Yeah. So yeah, soothing touch, we'll get to that in a little bit, but that can be really helpful. And the great point is, these ones you always make your own. So I kind of gave you a basic way of doing this mindful check-in, but you can make this check-in as quick or as long as you want to. For those of you who might have done some meditation before, this can be a 20-minute exercise. But, if you're a busy parent and you've got lots of things going on, this can really be, a 1-minute exercise just to sort of stop and just kind of notice what's going on around you, and then just bring your attention inwards and just see, like, where do I notice tension or stress or any other feelings that might be in my body that I can start to tune into, and just know that there's something there that I might need to take care of. That felt calming and centering. Yeah, I think we're going to do some more exercises with that, but there's also good just to sort of ground us and calm us in that moment, to sort of start to bring down that threat defense system, and sort of just bring a little bit of peace and space to our experience. All right, so we're going to move on to the next mindfulness exercise. And this, again, is one that can be done longer or shorter. You can really make these your own, whatever works for you best. But this one's really, I think, calming and centering exercise. This one is really going to get at that. This is a really quick exercise, and this one's really going to focus on using that physiology to sort of calm that threat defense system. The last one was really about noticing. This one is really going to be a calming exercise, how we can really use that breath and our body to slow ourselves down, to make ourselves more present, and just make ourselves calmer, so that we have that space to respond how we want to, how we choose to. So the way that we're going to do this is we're just going to find a slower than normal rhythm for our breathing. So we're going to try to breathe in very slowly for 4 to 6 seconds. And then we're going to breathe out again for 4 to 6 seconds. And with this exercise, just find the rhythm in that breathing that works for you. Sometimes if you try to go too long, it can feel like you're running out of air, and that can start to lead to some feelings of panic. That's not what we want in this exercise at all. So really find the breath, the pace of breath that's slowing you down, but still feels comfortable here. And so we're just going to do this sort of slow, soothing rhythm breathing for, 5 or 6 breaths in and 5 or 6 breaths out, and just really bring our body down in a really short period of time. So if you guys are ready, let's just start with our first in breath. Breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and breathe out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and breathe in. And breathe out. 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 Final breath, breathe in. And breathe out. So hopefully you guys can feel that as you really control that breathing and slow that breathing down, the rest of your body just responds to it and kind of brings it down to match your breathing. But I'd like to hear, what was your experience like with it? What were your thoughts about this short breathing exercise? What did you guys notice? Felt more, Lisa says she felt more in her body. Yeah, I think, when we're doing that mindful check-in, sometimes our thoughts really can tend to like get us carried away. But when we're just focusing on really controlling and regulating that breathing, I agree with Lisa. I really notice that body and just kind of notice it start to slow down with each breath, kind of just relax a little bit more and slow down a little bit more. So I think, that mindful check-in is really good for noticing when we have stuff going on. But this mindful breathing exercise can be really good for if we do notice that we're tense or maybe we're getting activated in the moment. We've done that check-in. This can be a really good one just to slow us down, just get us to calm our body down so that we can start to think a little bit more clearly and respond a little bit more clearly. And this only takes, a minute or two of slow breathing to really bring all that physiology back down a notch. It can be really helpful. Yeah, John noticed that brain body integration. Yeah. So once we get that body calming down, then it gives our mind a little bit more space too. If our body's not screaming red alert, then our mind doesn't have to be screaming that either. And so, yeah, you can notice your thoughts really quickly change with that exercise as well. Really great thoughts, guys. All right. Now this final exercise we're going to do is kind of putting it all together. And now we're really tapping into that safety soothing system with that self-kindness component skill of self-compassion here. So the first thing that we're going to do before we get started with this exercise is we're going to try to find our self-compassionate gesture. And I'm going to walk you through some gestures here. I just really want you to notice whatever gesture just feels most comfortable to you. What makes you just feel safe and warm on the inside? Something that might remind you of like being held by your mom as a child, just something that gives you that just warm, safe, connected feeling. So for this so to find our self-compassionate gesture, the first gesture we're going to try is just to put one hand on our stomach and one hand on our heart. And just hold it there and just breathe for a minute, holding this gesture. Just kind of notice your breath like we were doing in that mindful check-in. So you hold your hands here. And just noticing your hands on your chest, on your stomach. How does that feel? Take another breath to notice. Okay, now let's just slide that hand from our stomach and meet it with the hand on our chest. Let's cross our hands over our heart here. Again, just noticing. This make me feel warm. This make me feel cared for. This make me feel safe. Now let's slide our hands across our body, grab onto the sides of our arms. Just give ourselves a little squeeze, a little hug. Just noticing how this little self-hug feels. If this is a little bit too much, you also might just kind of hold one hand across your body and just grab onto one arm and just give your arm a little squeeze. Especially if you're in public or not in a place where you feel like giving yourself a hug would be comfortable, this can be another one just to give yourself a little bit of self-compassion in a more subtle way. Now I invite you to slide your hands up and maybe just kind of grab onto your neck. Just give your neck a little hold. Kind of maybe a little bit like a self-massage, just giving that neck a little squeeze. Just noticing how that feels. Just breathing normally. Now I'd like to invite you to slide your hands from your neck to your face. Just cover your face. Put your face into the palm of your hands. Just hold it there. Just cradle your face. You might even close your eyes as you do this. And just breathe for a moment. So I'd just invite you to choose one of those gestures or make another one that feels more comfortable to you. Just a gesture that makes you feel safe and secure, gives you a little bit of warmth. It's all about just finding a gesture that's comfortable for you. And just hold on and remember that as we proceed through this exercise. So once you've had your compassionate gesture picked out, I would like you to bring to mind an ongoing difficult situation. Not something too difficult though. This shouldn't be a situation that's really going to overwhelm you in the moment. Something that's bothering you, causing you some stress, some tension, some worry. Something a little bit, I always like to use the hotness scale, something medium spicy or less. If we pick something too difficult, we get too overwhelmed, it can be a little bit hard to kind of keep going through this exercise and learning these skills. All right. So when you've had a moment, you've picked out that difficult situation that's on your mind, still bothering you a little bit, I'd like you to adopt whatever compassionate gesture you chose. For me, it's cradling my face, but I'm not going to do that one here since I have to continue talking to you all. So I'm going to just do hands over the heart. And the first thing we're going to do is bring a little mindfulness to this difficult situation that we have going on. And just acknowledge that we are going through something hard right now. So I invite you to find a phrase that really captures this. I'll give you a few examples, but as always, feel free to make up your own. Find the language that feels most natural for you. So thinking about this difficult situation, just going to acknowledge it, saying something like, man, this is really hard right now. You might say, this is a moment of suffering. Just acknowledge that hurt, that pain. Just repeat that phrase a couple times. Let it sink in. This is really hard right now. This is really hard right now. Next, we're going to bring a little common humanity to this difficult situation. Just recognize that we're not alone in this. You might say something like, I'm not alone. Everyone struggles with stuff. Suffering is a part of life. Just repeat that phrase that you like to yourself. I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Now we're going to go ahead and give ourselves a little kindness, a little support, some encouraging words that we could really use right now. Just to let us know that we're cared for and supported. You might say something like, I'm here for you. I care for you. I love you. You got this. Just pick that phrase you like. I'm here for you. Just repeat it. I'm here for you. Let that feeling of care, concern for yourself sink in. Now, at this point, you can continue holding your compassionate gesture, saying the phrases if that's what you read right now. But if you're ready, I'd invite you to come back and just share your thoughts on what it was like warming up that safety soothing system and giving yourself a bit of care and support and love through that self-compassionate break. Acknowledging the difficulty helped me feel more loving to myself with ease. Yeah, just kind of noticing it's there. Then we have that choice to do something about it, give ourselves a little bit more warmth and kindness. Yeah, I think that's really important. Any other thoughts? I really like this self-compassion break for parents because, you know, when we have especially young kids or we're the only one there for them, we often don't have that opportunity to take a real break, just go take care of ourselves. And just something like this in the moment can really kind of be that boost you need to get through. Just know that you have somebody there supporting you to just take a moment and really just, put that oxygen mask on for yourself and just give yourself a little bit of care and concern and support so that you have that resource to handle whatever's going on with your kid. And I mean, the beautiful thing about this exercise is that you can do this basically anywhere at any time, that you notice yourself struggling and going through something difficult, that you just have that opportunity to notice it, and then just to give yourself some compassion and grace. Just treat yourself a little bit differently. And you might notice you relating to yourself completely different in that situation, or your kid completely differently after just taking that moment to sort of soothe yourself. So I think this can be a really powerful exercise for parents and caregivers, especially when they're in the heat of the moment. So the final thing I'd like to do here is just point out a few books and resources. I'll include these with the exercise instructions that I send out to you later, but I think these are just a couple great books that I would recommend for anybody interested in learning more about self-compassion. The first book is Kristin Neff's book on self-compassion. This is really the original book on self-compassion. She just writes in a very straightforward, relatable, easy to read way, and this can just be a good first introduction to anybody who wants to know more about self-compassion and just relating to themselves a little bit more kindly. The second book I threw in here was Self-Compassion for Parenting. I think it's a lot of the same material as Kristin's book, but really just puts it in the context of a lot of issues that parents go through, and just like a very, it's almost a cathartic understanding between the writer of this book, the author, Susan Polk, and any parent about just what they're going through and how to sort of apply those self-compassion practices in the heat of the moment, with kind of common caregiving scenarios. And then finally, I included this book on managing your anger by Russell Coates. This was the book that really originally brought me to compassion and self-compassion. And for any guys out there who might be dealing with more struggles related to anger than, say, self-criticism, I think this is a really good book for really understanding how to manage your anger and your caregiving role. So that tends to be something that we deal a little bit more with. But I appreciate you so much for joining me for this self-compassion for caregivers workshop. And I hope that these exercises both helped make your day a little bit better today and will be useful and beneficial for you in the future in your caregiving relationships. So with that, I will say goodbye and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Oliver. Yeah, everybody have a great day.